Welcome to Barnaby's podcast, Eye of the Beholder. Barnaby's is one of the leading search engines for art, design, antiques, and collectibles from over 3,000 auction houses worldwide. We aim to make the art and auction market more transparent and accessible to everyone, from beginners to collectors and professionals. Banknotes are so much more than paper money. Their historical significance, their intricate details, and the stories they tell make them valuable collectibles, coveted by enthusiasts worldwide. The question is, in this ever-evolving digital economy, will their collectibility endure? In today's episode, we chat with a true authority in the field, British banknote expert, dealer, and publisher, Pamela West. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you.
So the first coins come from Lydia, which is a part of today's Turkey as early as 650 years before Christ. But what about the banknotes? How old are the oldest banknotes?
Well, the oldest banknotes would go back to those printed on mulberry bark by the Chinese. Now, I am actually a British banknote specialist rather than a world specialist. And those items that what I just referred to, they're extremely large and very intricate and very delicate. There are also very early Swedish items, which you might well be aware of, but they are outside of what I deal in. But it is a fascinating world, the collecting of banknotes, which we refer to as nataphilie, which people often say we're numismatists. However, I just found them fascinating and got into it really. I'm currently the president of the International Banknote Society, chairperson of my London club. I did say I wanted to resign, but they won't let me. So, so early banknotes, and especially now, ones with the Queen on, obviously later than the early banknotes, are highly sought after, especially in good condition. And many countries do have banknotes and did have banknotes with the Queen on. Obviously, they'll change for us in the UK next year.
You said the first one came from China, but how old is the British banknotes then?
Well, the British banknotes, if I more or less stick to sort of Bank of England, more or less, in 1694 the Bank of England began, and the first banknotes they ever produced weren't really what we call the banknotes like we have today, although the very early ones were on white paper. The paper was quite strong, but the ink was quite acidic, and they weren't actually banknotes in the current form. However, very early ones from the 1700s, the Bank of England does have a museum, which is actually free to visit, and you would be able to see some very early pieces there. When it comes to can the ordinary collector collect a banknote that early, logically no, because there's so few available, and the Bank of England obviously has those in hand. However, it doesn't stop us from looking forever.
No. That's like the Holy Grail or what?
Yes, but there are other things to collect within the Bank of England and the British Isles, certainly.
What is the difference by collecting coins and collecting banknotes? Because coin is it's a very large collecting area, I would say. But what's the difference? Does a collector sometimes collect both?
Well, we like to think that they move from coins to banknotes, but not normally banknotes to coins. Uh, Coin collecting, I think, probably because coins, as you quite rightly said, were out first. People, if they could afford it, might have put something away. There are coin hoards that are found. There are things that are buried, things that are lost at sea. So coins will survive the tenacity of the weather, as it were. And there are far more collectors of coins, and there's a far wider variety of coins because they go back so far. You know, you can buy a Roman coin probably for about, I don't know, maybe £50, whereas you can't buy a Roman banknote for £50. It just would not be possible. So in terms of what's the difference between them and do these people move on, when you collect, you rarely ever get to the end of collecting. If you say I've completed a collection, well, what else do? You have to then move on to another area. It might become something esoteric, like collecting banknotes on something, or a different area of collecting, as it were. So the difference is there's fewer people who collect banknotes, which means it's far easier to obtain banknotes. However, there's a finite amount of everything, whereas with coins, there never seems to be.
But what is the difference on banknotes compared to other forms of currency? And I mean, what makes the British banknotes unique compared to those other countries? So you mentioned the Swedish ones.
Okay. Um, every banknote is unique in as much as every banknote has a cipher, a serial number that is individual and unique to that banknote. So if I own A010007 of that particular banknote, no one else can own that banknote. Whereas if you have a coin and it's a gold sovereign, for instance, say of 1982, where hopefully they made them then everybody else can have the same thing. But so the uniqueness really, when you collect, you generally are trying to complete a collection that fills in the gaps of either type. You might collect for nostalgic reasons. You might collect scientists on banknotes. You might collect banknotes from the first to the last of a particular series, a particular signature. But whatever happens, you end up expanding it beyond what you ever expect to do. So, and also banknotes represent the country that they're from. They could be, in Scotland, you'll have the World Heritage Series on a series of banknotes. In England, we have historical figures. But I tell you what now, people generally wouldn't know who those historical figures are, which on the Bank of England polymer notes are Churchill, Austin, Turner, and Turing.
But are there any notable milestones in the history of British banknotes, and how have they evolved over time?
Well, there are always milestones because there are things to overcome when they're producing banknotes, in terms of technology and security. And the printers do introduce things that perhaps we don't necessarily see. Just like it's illegal to not photograph, but to scan a banknote, there are things in the banknote which will stop you from scanning within your printer. But in 1941, for instance, the Bank of England, Mr. The Bank of England general manager, he introduced a metal thread, and banknotes before that didn't actually have a metal thread, whereas now the polymer ones, once again, they don't, because they have a different type of material to use and can't incorporate a metal thread. And at that time, it meant that because white notes had actually been forged by the Germans, that subsequently white notes had a metal thread, and that made them more secure, and so people were then more sure of the banknotes, the white notes, as it were. And also during the war, the colour of the banknotes changed, the 10 shilling and the pound. They went from reddy brown to mauve and from green to pink and blue. But after the war, they went back, and that was also in case they were forged, whereas as in fact they weren't actually forged. People refer to the forging of the pound, but it was actually really the white notes, the fives, the higher denominations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say they're hard to detect. On our website, we have as much information about the Bernhard forgeries so that people are more aware of what to look out for. And on that basis, you can actually have a look. And we don't mind if people send us a picture of something, a good scan, and we'll have a look at it and we'll be able to advise. But on the other hand, third-party grading companies also get it wrong and slab genuine notes as forgeries. So we then step in again. Somebody bought something from us 11 years ago. He did say, "Can you give me my money back?" And we said, "Yes, of course we can give you your money back, but can we look into this, because I don't believe I'd made a mistake." And we had it reslabbed as genuine, and he got it back. I could have made a huge profit 11 years on, but our customers are important to us, and our reputation.
Yeah, of course, of course. But that means that you have come across fake notes during your time as a collector.
Oh gosh, Oh yes, yes. Nothing more annoying than when you see something on an online auction and you write to the person and say, "That's a bit of paper," and they write back, "Yes, white notes are on bits of paper, but they're actually on watermark bits of paper." And you try to warn them, but they won't take it off. And I think the worst thing that's happened since polymer notes came out is the fact that with a certain chemical, you can take ink off of the polymer banknotes, and these notes have been sold to unsuspecting public. And it's a fraud on a huge scale. Um, and it's a shame because people believe they've bought an error. We've been at a show where somebody has said, "I've got an error note, a polymer error note," and before they've got it out their wallet or their special album, we tell them they haven't. And they're saying, "How can you say that? You haven't seen it." Well, that's because it's billions and billions to one. If I, as an error collector, in real life, I've found one error note in my whole lifetime of collecting. So since 1975, how can someone be on an online platform and have sold 5, 10, or 20 errors that are not actually real and get away with it?
But, but no, exactly. What do you do when you see this, and what impact does it has on the market?
Um, well, fortunately, a lot of this particular type of error has sort of dropped off. They'll probably try and do it with when the King notes come out, and it's actually illegal to deface an English banknote. It's an illegal act, um, and it has been suggested to me by the powers that be that I just contact those people and tell them. However, I'm going to do an article in our journal, the IBNS journal, and show how dramatic these errors look and how fake they actually are, and the reason why they're fake, and hopefully get that out so people will try to understand what they're buying is not real, and all they're doing is lining fraudsters' pockets. And then it will go into local, not local press, but the local magazine, the Coin magazine here.
So at least the collectors know. Have you came across? Well, obviously you have come across fakes in your career, but can you tell us what kind of security features are used on modern British banknotes to prevent this?
Well, the Bank of England actually has a really good website in comparison to how things used to be. Nowadays, they're far more open with information about what's on the banknote. You can get leaflets, what to look for. Most people don't really look at their banknotes, which is a bit of a shame because there's quite a lot of nice security features on them. As long as they're, you can, especially when they're in nice condition when they first come out, you can see everything. And there are things in there that are hidden messages which we are not meant to know about, which are security features. But if I were to say that in reality, if something is created by a human being, then another human being can copy it. Maybe not as well. So you always have to be on the lookout, but perhaps you're almost safer with real money rather than being scammed out of it on your phone or by these people who are send me money. Well, you wouldn't, if somebody, if my son called and said, or sent me a message saying I need a new phone, can you, lend me £500? I mean, first of all, I'll know it's not him because just because of the way he would ask the message, and he's never asked to borrow money. Whereas people are getting scammed with things like that, but you wouldn't send them £500 cash, would you? No, you just send it on the phone or by your computer. So it's easier to get scammed by that. But in terms of can things be faked, modern notes, yes, of course they can. Like everything can be faked.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately. But have you ever collected any other banknotes than British banknotes? And why British? Because you're British, or is there something particular with the currency and the banknotes?
Even smaller than British, I actually specialise in Bank of England. In fact, some years ago, Vincent Duggleby, who used to be on Moneybox, he handed over the reins to us for English Paper Money, the book, and our 10th edition is due out soon. We finalised that, which is weight off my shoulders. So, in terms of collecting Bank of England, why? I don't know, I was on a weekend out with my then boyfriend, and I'm like, oh, bored, 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 because he was a philatelist, a GB booklet pain specialist. And I looked on the wall, and there was a frame of banknotes, and there was a mauve 10 shilling. And I said, what's that? They told me, and I said, how much? And they said, £1.50. Wasn't so many years previous that we'd been pre-decimal, so I thought, 30 bob, £1.50. Pete, lend me £1.50. I never paid him back, and I still have the note.
I know. But do you still have the boyfriend?
I married him
Yeah,
46 years ago.
that's great.
um,
Yeah.
so, and then after that, I started to buy error banknotes that had different serial numbers or extra paper, and I was going to be specialised. I was going to collect only O'Brien's signature. However, years later, I mean, it's 7 albums of errors. It's just one of those things that grow. But I think it's the hunt, isn't it? When I first read English Paper Money, the book, I read it. I thought, wow, this is interesting, and I understand it. It was quite easy to understand. So with Peter, when we went to fairs, I had a little book and I wrote in there things that I would buy so they didn't duplicate stuff. But when I first started collecting, I'd ride up on my motorbike, my hair in pigtails, crash helmet, and I'd say, oh, I'd like to see your banknotes. And they'd say, here you are, give me a load of rubbish to look at. And then I would say, well, I'm looking for a B251 X21E in EF by Pepia. And they go, here you are, madam, have a look in this. Same person.
Uh,
So knowledge is power. You really have to
yeah.
learn what it is you're interested in. And it's not like you can just go and throw money at collecting. You should want to collect something. You should want to enjoy that. It should be pleasing to you financially. Obviously, it's got to be within your budget, which you should always stick to, which is very difficult when you get auction fever. Um, but if there's a book on the subject, buy the book, read it. I mean, we we joke with our collectors and we call it bedtime reading. We say you're going to take this book to bed, you're going to read it, you're going to sort of take all that information in, and we hope they read it from cover to cover. Because sometimes people say to me, "Oh, I never read the stuff at the front," and I'm thinking, just because they know that somebody might have written about it before they read the whole book, but they knew what was in it. Or me as the author now, I do a page and it's things that I've found. I have to temper what I have to say because some things you can't say. But if people meet us at shows, I find that people like to come along and chat and talk about things they've found or ask questions. And if you collect, you can be what we call an armchair collector. You can sit at home and never see anyone. And obviously, there are people who are physically not able to get out. But if you can get to a show, if you can go meet dealers, if you can buy from auction houses, get a receipt. So I don't mean just auction houses, but us as well. If you're buying from people and you get a receipt for the thing you bought, you're sort of guaranteed by that. I don't mean a COA, a certificate of authenticity. I don't need to buy something that has a certificate of authenticity when I'm buying something that's authentic already. Is real. So, but fortunately for me, I do know whether it's real. But we're happy to chat with people when we're at a show, my club meetings. Try and join a club. In banknote terms, I know it's limited, but if you join a coin club, they will guide you in the right direction as well. Hopefully.
Mm. Well, how many members are you in the club?
In the International Banknote Society, we have about 1,800 members. Now, it doesn't sound a lot, but a lot of people nowadays, I mean, there are thousands and thousands of people who are just using the WhatsApp groups, the Facebook groups, etc., because the modern young person and the people who are very techy understand that this is a way of immediate interaction. However, these people don't necessarily always join a society because they feel they don't want to spend £28, as it were, for the IBNS. But the IBNS, the people who join the IBNS are serious, genuine collectors and always happy to part with information and advice. We have forums, a WhatsApp forum, an online forum. We have a magazine that's just won speciality category of the year with at the ANA, American Numismatic Association. And I think they're, I don't want to say it's slightly different, but these are the people who are very avid and very caring about the hobby itself. So although there's not as many members as I'd like there to be, I'd like there to be 18,000 members. I don't know if we can print that many journals. But the ANA, the American Numismatic Association, they have thousands of members because coins is a bigger area. But there are other societies, the SPMC, Society of Paper Money Collectors, the Latin American Collectors. There are other societies as well. So we don't have a maximum. I mean, we just would like people to join. But a lot of the collectors are getting the collectors like me, as it were, are still getting older. But younger people are coming into it in a modern way.
But what actually makes the banknotes valuable to collectors? Is it the amount of existing banknotes, or is it the number or the color, or?
Okay, so banknotes themselves, let's stick with paper at the moment because that's one aspect that they've generally always been. It can be the prefix, so an A01 could be a first, a Z99 could be the last. It could be a replacement, so it might be a double Z or a double Y. The condition is important. The age of the note and where it comes from can make it valuable. At the end of the day, you can actually go to a fair and even buy banknotes sort of 10, 20p, 50p, which are absolutely mint condition, but they are made in their millions and millions and there's no shortage of them. So you can actually collect quite cheaply. It just depends on what it is you actually want to collect. So with regards to current Bank of England notes, I mean, they're polymer, so it's not been a great deal to look out for. There's been the first prefix on the first issues. But when they change a signature for the chief cashier, for instance, they don't produce a new banknote for the chief cashier. And it can be a continuation of series, in which case you don't know what the end is and you don't know what the beginning is for the new cashier. So those are good things to try and find. And people often look for those. But with the current polymer notes, the chances of finding what I call these continuations of series in mint condition is really, really difficult, really difficult. But the first prefix is generally the Bank of England have sold the low numbers in auction, and people should be aware that when they're buying in that auction, it is for charity. So they will be paying more than you might do for just a regular AA01. You might pay £1,000 for one in auction, but you can buy the same note without that very low serial number for £70 on our website, for instance. So it's different things appeal to different people.
Yeah, I can imagine. But what is your number one in your collection?
Number one, no one's going to have a number one. I do and I don't. Everybody thinks of the white £1,000 note from the 1930s, and you think £1,000 note. You can't believe we ever produced that, but the Bank of England did, and they stopped them in the 1930s. However, the £200 is even rarer. There have been fewer £200 notes ever in private hands than the 1,000, and yet everyone doesn't say I want a 200, they want the 1,000. And I think it's because it's an iconic number. I mean, you can't believe, I mean, you don't even see a £50 note these days and you think, why on earth would you have a £1,000 note? But when it comes down to it, in those days, if you were a merchant ship, you were in big business, you didn't want to carry 10 £100 notes on you, you'd carry a £1,000 note. Of course, mere mortals didn't see that sort of money. They barely saw a 2 bob coin sort of thing. But they did exist and they were used. But they exist in far more quantity than the 200. So for me, the iconic one to get hold of was 200. And it took me a long time before I got one. And I have one of the three known. So yeah.
And what kind of values are we talking about in the collecting society?
It's got to be probably around £30,000. But put things into perspective, I had some pension pot money that came in, and so I thought, well, I don't know, it's something, and also it was my money or our money. We decided that we would buy the item, and it was joint agreement, obviously. At the end of the day, we get to enjoy it, and our son will obviously, hopefully, one day have a lovely life with the things that we've collected. Because we didn't buy it because of the value of it. It's just that opportunity to be able to buy it, and the limited opportunities. You are up against some, very, very wealthy people. And sometimes with collecting, it's being in the right place at the right time, being avid about collecting. And it's not about how much you spend. As I said, you can throw money at it, but you could still end up with a load of rubbish, couldn't you? It'd be like buying a Meissen teapot that somebody packs and knocks the handle off to get it in the box. I mean, it'd be a bit pointless, wouldn't it, really?
But what advice would you give to aspiring collectors or individuals interested in starting a collection of British banknotes?
Well, there are various books on British banknotes, and I would always say look and see if you can buy the books. I mean, we published some of them, so I'm not necessarily trying to put myself forward, but there are books out there, and I would say read as much as you can. I mean, it's nice going on Facebook and asking questions of people, but I do find sometimes these people will say, "What's the value of this?" And somebody says, "How much is it?" So they're not asking, "How much do you want to give me?" They're asking, "What's the value?" The value of something isn't necessarily the amount of money you'll get for something. So you have to be a bit aware of things like that. So I would say, in terms of banknotes, the IBNS itself has a really good book on how to grade banknotes. So when you join, you would get that automatically. Choose the area you want to collect. Buy the book if you can. If it's banknotes, try to learn how to grade your banknote. Learn what the difference is between a washed note or one that's been tampered with. For me, a white note that's got an ink annotation where people used to write 17 over 100 because it came out of a pack of 100. That's the original ink annotation. Don't try and take that off. It's part of its history. In early days, when there were so few people around, people used to write their name and address on the back. That's great. I mean, it's a nice bit of history. And banks, don't, Westminster Bank, 1934 or whatever. Great. Don't touch banknotes. Don't try and clean them. Don't try and press them. Have your budget. Just say, try to get to a show if you can. Don't be afraid of professional dealers and auction houses. You can ask questions, but what you also have to keep in mind is people only have so much time. Sometimes people will ask us, "Oh, I've sent you some pictures. Can you tell me what they're worth?" And I actually have a job to do. I mean, we will reply to everybody, but we do need time. We also prefer people to say what they actually want rather than just send a picture. I don't know what the picture's for. So I would say, stick to your budget, collect what you enjoy, what you like. It might be from a nostalgic point of view. You might have travelled somewhere, but try to, if you're going to spend a lot of money on it, you should understand whether that's the right price for that item. Um, it's not always because something's expensive. It doesn't mean to say it's actually worth that. Um, but compare prices if you can. And I appreciate that can be a bit limited. And make sure you're buying a genuine product. Certainly in banknotes, coins, obviously there's a lot of problems with, there can be forgeries, and with white notes there certainly can be forgeries, and you have to be aware of it. I mean, our book covers it. The website, you can look on the website, it's totally free. So I think you just got to understand what it is you want to collect and why, and stick to it. But eventually you do expand and start collecting everything, like I do: checks, money on banknotes on postcards, all sorts of stuff. You do tend to expand, but I never did expand into coins. I left coins from when I was a child and went into banknotes.
So it's an interest you had for a long time, obviously. But what is your, this will be the last question, but maybe a tricky one, but what is your personal opinion on the future banknotes and their place in the digital economy? Because obviously now, if some would rule the world, we would just have bitcoins, for example.
Yeah. Well, bit of a catch-22 really, isn't it? I hope that banknotes will continue to circulate, and in a far, far future, if they ever are outmoded, hopefully it'll be a currency that's backed in the real world, and I mean by a real bank. Um, and for the sake of our hobby, I hope that banknotes continue to be issued for many years to come. I mean, I've never bought Bitcoin. I've never listened to people who said buy Bitcoin, you'll make a mint, etc. Um, I appreciate a digital currency is probably possible and probably highly likely, but I would like it to be backed by the bank. In my case, the Bank of England, because their money is secure. Whereas I understand Bitcoin, is that not mined? And you know, and that's mined by an individual or a computer program with various logarithms on algorithms, etc. That's not quite the same as something that's backed by a real bank. I mean, I'm not a financier, but Bank of England banknotes. They're supported by Bank of England securities. Jersey, Guernsey, and Isle of Man are British Crown dependencies and self-governing, and regulate their own banknotes. Scotland and Ireland are fully backed at all times by ring-fenced backing assets, partly held in Bank of England notes and UK coin. But if the Bank of England said we're going to have a digital currency and banknotes are going to disappear, which definitely will not happen very soon because we've got the Queen notes that will last and we've got the King notes coming out next year. So the notes will last a good 5-10 years at least before they change the design, obviously with the King on again, but maybe a new historical figure. And I think there are a lot of people who still don't have the wherewithal to have a bank account and be able to spend money. And if you know you've got £100 in your pocket, that's all you've got to spend. Digital currency, tapping and going. A lot of people don't know how much they're spending. They're not keeping an eye on it. They think they know how much is going out, but how much do you actually spend on teas and coffees and sandwiches and the odd bit here and there and the parking? And at the end of the week, you spent a lot of money. Whereas if you had £100 in your pocket, you would know this is all I've got. This is all I've got to spend. So I can see a digital currency coming eventually, but I want it to be supported by a bank, a real bank, and then by my bank. But at that point, everyone will have to have the most up to date system on their phone, and they won't be able to use that phone that doesn't take pictures or just doesn't send messages. So somewhere along the line, it's the app has got to be unbelievably strong and secure.
Yeah, we see what happens. The future will tell. But thanks a lot, Pamela, for participating. And it was an interesting discussion about the topic that I haven't looked into so much myself, but I will definitely do after this chat. So thanks a lot.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Pontus. Thank you.
To keep up with the latest trends and receive weekly updates on the art and auction world, subscribe to our newsletter on barnabys.com or read Barnabys magazine online.